Lumberjacks is sponsored by Echo, only professional grade with 5-year warranty. Crown, protect, maintain, save. Dickies, quality workwear since 1922. Yamaha, rev your heart.
The Saws are all warmed up and ready to go for the Ontario Lumberjack Championships. It's a full house in Brechin, just outside of Orillia, to see the best that Ontario has to offer. And the stage is set for the first event of the day, the Springboard Chop. Let's send it to Bill Deba and Rod Cumberland for more.
Well, we're going to be showing you the top 3 heats of the Springboard Chop, starting off with Chris versus Marcel. Now, a lot of this field, these guys from New York, they haven't seen much of Marcel Dupuis.
Marcel Dupuis just new at it, really, from New Brunswick. He's only been at it about 5 years. You see him make a little flick there, flick that chip out of the way. You want to make sure that your springboard notch goes back to a nice tight V so that the toe of that springboard goes right to the back of the pole, the notch that you want it in, so it doesn't sag.
Marcel doing a great job staying ahead of Chris at this point. He's also he's an excellent athlete, right?
Marcel used to compete at firefighter events all across North America. Actually done very well at that, but he's hung up the hoses and grabbed his axe box, doing really well in New Brunswick at Lumberjack Sports.
Well, Chris Henning's just getting his second board in. Actually, Chris is bringing his second board back down to the ground. Marcel's going to win this heat if he stays on the board. He's doing a great job.
The pole's wobbling a lot. You see these poles are set into gravel. If you set a springboard pole in the ground like that, you should be set at least a couple weeks in advance so they have time to saw it up, make them really firm.
Chris Henning's a little bit happier with his notch now. He gets his board on there. He's a big guy. It's got to be stable. Look at Marcel Dupuis hammering away at that wood. He's going to be flipping over the backside very soon.
Chops really fast. He keeps his pace. I don't know who's told him that, but they say chop fast at the top of Marcel, and he knows he's got to go quick. Look at the pace he's at here. He's the first one done.
Marcel Dupuis wins the first heat of the Springboard Chop. Marcel, your Springboard Chop is coming along really good. I saw you a couple of years ago in St. Stephen, New Brunswick. It's coming good. What are you working on in the Springboard?
Well, it's all about pockets. If you have a good pocket, you can have a good chop. If your pocket's no good and your board's leaning, you can be as good as you want. You're not going to be able to use all your power. So
on your first notch, after your 5th hit, you went for it. Was there any question there?
No, because it had come to a V. I just wasn't sure. There was a little piece of wood there. I flicked it with my hand just to make sure. But when it's to a V, you can't go farther than that. So
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, this is the last heat of the Springboard Chop. We got Starr versus Fenniger in this one. 2 top-notch guys, one from Canada, one from the U.S. Should be a great battle.
One looking at a big pole, one looking at a small pole. Look how tiny Cecil Starr's pole is. Actually makes it a lot better to get your notch out in a pole that small.
Cecil on the board, slightly ahead of Fenniger right now, trying to flick out his last few pieces. Fenniger also working on his second notch. Who's going to be Fenniger or Starr? Cecil drives his axe in and jams his board in the second notch.
Cecil had a phenomenal Springboard Chop in the Maritimes just a few weeks earlier. Interesting to see him up here. Actually, two great choppers here, Canada and the United States, going head-to-head in the Springboard.
Fenniger one swing ahead of Cecil. Cecil picking up the pace a little bit right now. Once again, both guys look like they have excellent blocks.
Picking up the pace, but you see his lines are a lot sloppier. Well, one thing that happens when you pick up your pace, sometimes you lose your momentum, you lose where you're swinging, and that's happened to Cecil.
Time to be right now. Gaston is at 58.36. Both guys switching over to the backside. Fenniger ahead at this point. Looks like Fenniger's going to drive things off. He chips things out. Fenniger wins a Springboard with a 56-36. Cecil right behind him. That was an excellent race with Cecil. You took a little bit more time, especially on your second notch. I heard the announcer say, a nice deep pocket for Paul.
Yeah. Well, the thing with this tree, it's small at the top, so the wood is really soft. So I knew if I was going to have a chance to catch Cecil in a chop, I had to have a perfect pocket and a good board. So I made sure I put those 6 hits in hard and deep, and my board held nicely. It was nice and flat. I was able to get back on my board, get a lot of power in my swing, and come up ahead.
You left a fair amount of work on your backside as well. Is that part of the plan? Because you spend a lot of time on your backside.
Yeah, not generally. I missed a couple hits on my backside. On my slope side down, I was just missing my mark a little bit. It should have been 3 to 4 hits. It took me a couple extra more than if I would have hit my mark, I would have been off a lot sooner.
Fenniger holds on to the top spot in the Springboard Chop, with Dupuis, Starr, Course, and Dupuis rounding out the top 5. Welcome back to the Ontario Lumberjack Championships. I'm Natalie Stoberman. Now have a look at those vessels ready to go on this beautiful day in Brechin, Ontario, just nestled in Orillia. And out here, it's known as Lake Country. And it's only an hour north from the big city in Toronto. And we're starting the women's stock saw with a big matchup to keep these championships going. Rod and Bill, take it away.
Well, in New York, you hear the word stock saw. The two names that come to mind are Finnegar and Michelacci.
Well, here we are battling with CS Echo 600s, two cuts, both within 4 inches, 11 inches round of trembling aspen.
And they're neck and neck right now. They're even. Oh, but Laura Finnegar misses her second cut up.
And Laura Finnegar looks like she's playing catch-up right now, and she wins the first heat with 11.98 seconds. Laura, that was a come-from-behind victory there. You were well behind in taking that big, fat first cut. Were you worried about taking a too thin one on the second one?
No, I was just hoping I got it in straight, so I didn't make a wide cut.
Because you only have 4 inches, and that first one cost you about 2.5, maybe 3 inches.
Yes, it did.
You only got 4 inches to work with, Rod, on a piece of wood. Certainly, if you take 3 in the first one, it doesn't leave you with much.
Then, of course, you're always thinking, I got to set it. I don't have a whole lot of room here to make the second cut.
Next, he's Mary Dooley taking on Christine Gibb, our only Canadian competitor here in terms of the females. Christine is a former competitor from Sir Sandford Fleming College. 11.98 is the time to beat.
But she's an arborist by day. She runs a saw every day of her life, so you know she's going to be pretty good at this event.
She's very relaxed. She's well ahead of Mary at this point. Look how smooth Christine with that transition. And Christine Gibb wins the second heat with 11.42. Christine, I mean, you got a lot of experience with chainsaws. Tell me what that means when you get into a chainsaw stock saw event like that.
I guess I just, from everyday use, I know just by the sound of it how much pressure or how little pressure to give it.
But you made that look relatively easy, beating Mary, who doesn't work with a saw every day, but she is an experienced competitor.
Yeah, it's, I guess it just comes natural.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Well, Christine is our only female competitor from Ontario, and she is now leading the way with 11.42 in the women's stock saw. As we head into the final heat, we got Mary Reeder taking on Tracy Henning.
A fast time to beat, usually affects you mentally, and you can see that bothered Mary. She had a hard time getting her saw into the wood. Tracy Henning making a nice smooth cut there. Oh, and Mary bobbles on her second upcut.
Both girls are having a hard time right now. Tracy struggled on her way up, but Tracy wins the heat with a 13.83. You had a couple of difficulties there. Starting right out of the gate, the first cut, what happened in the very first...
I didn't quite have my stance just right, and you know, it just not a familiar saw to me, but very good running saw though, and it just, you know, got the best of me.
And then the second cut coming up, you just had a hard time getting it in there.
Like again, I didn't have my stance, and it just, you know, it just didn't work too well today, that's all.
Unfortunately, Reeder is left out of the top 5, and that includes Christine Gibb leading the way with a cut time of 11.42 seconds. Welcome back to Lumberjacks, and we're still in Brechin for the Ontario Championships, and these Lumberjills are getting ready for their next event, the bow saw, and you can see their focus, their grit, and their determination for the event that has many names. Right, Rod?
They call this thing the Swede saw, the buck saw, the pulp saw. There's all kinds of names for it, but it's the same event, using a bow saw, one cut down through, it looks like about 11 or 12 inches around a popple.
And just like any other sawing event, you got to keep the saw blade in the wood if you want it to cut. You got to keep the bow over the saw blade as well, and try not to rock it like the Vaughn is on the left-hand side.
Actually, Colin has a pretty good technique here on the right. You see her moving back and forth. Could use a little bit more of the blade, but she's got a lot of firm pressure cutting through that wood pretty fast.
Lavon struggling a little bit still with rocking. Colin Coors a nice job and a smooth finish there, and sets the time to beat. Pretty smooth and no hang-ups there at all. Do you find that in your push stroke you go all the way through and not quite using your full blade, I don't think?
Yeah, I've been trying to work on that. I had a training session a couple weeks ago. It went a little bit better than that cut did. Been struggling the last few years, but I'm overall kind of happy with that cut.
This is the last and final heat of the women's bow saw. Colin Coors in the last heat set up the time to beat with a 17.58. We got Mary taking on Tracy in this one.
Stronger ladies in this event, usually they dominate the bow saw event. You see Tracy has a little bit different technique, very fast and quick, but look at Mary doing everything right, putting a lot of weight on it, pulling the blade, whole blade really fast. She's got a great cut.
Tracy's short stroking really cost her. Mary Dooley wins the bow saw. We've talked about it before. Just tell me about, you know, the women that go a little bit earlier or a little bit lighter. Just tell me how you balance, your strength that you have and the speed that you put in there.
Well, basically, with a woman, it's got to come from your legs because you don't have the upper body. So when I train, I really work on moving my legs fast so I can keep that downward pressure. To get it to be music is really difficult to do.
Slow and steady wins the race for Mary Dooley with a winning time of 14.44 seconds in the ladies' bow saw.
Well, it's nice to have the Chris Starr Memorial Axe Throw come up to Brechin, Ontario, a little bit closer to him and Cecil's hometown. The last couple of years, it's been held in New York State. A lot of good friends compete and live in New York. Chris Henning is our first axe thrower. 3 throws, bullseye is 5, outer ring is 1.
Axe throw, always an interesting event. This event here has a small target, so that may play on the thrower's head a little bit, but of course, all you gotta do is focus on that big bullseye and try to sink it in there.
Well, Chris Henning's got a 2-throw total of 7 as he heads into his 3rd throw. He's gonna need a bullseye to probably keep him in this game. He's got 3 throwers yet to go, and he drifts off a little bit to the right-hand side for a 3-throw total of 10 points. That 3rd one really cost him drifting off to the right.
10 points, not a big score in the axe throw. There's still some good axe throwers to come, so obviously we're going to look for someone else to clinch us at a lot higher score.
Well, next up is Tim Keach, and he's won a lot of axe throws over the years. We always seem to see him in the finals. His first throw drifts off a little bit. He's got to be disappointed with anything but a bullseye. I know Tim Keach is. He starts with a 4 in his first throw. Here comes his 2nd throw, and he's got a little bit of a different axe head there.
A lot of times guys will hit 2 points if they over-rotate. You see that Tim's axe has been modified. Here's an experienced axe thrower. He's got both points on the back of his double bitter ground off.
Well, there's Tim Keach's 3rd throw. It comes in with a 4. He's got a 3-throw total of 11 points, puts him in the 1st place overall. Still 2 axe throwers to go. Tim Keach is now in 1st place in the axe throw.
He's also, you can see his axe, he's got holes bored in them. That's actually to lighten the axe a little bit as well. But of course, the same number of holes in both ends of the axe. You got to keep the axe the same weight so it's good and balanced.
Well, here's Cecil Starr. Got to be a little bit emotional for him to be participating in the Chris Starr Memorial Axe Throw in the finals here. And he starts off with a lot of confidence with a solid bullseye and 5 points.
Sometimes that'll really mess you up. Throwing that bullseye, you know you've got a perfect score, and you see it's having this effect here, of course, on the nerves with Cecil.
Yeah, he drifted off to the top there and just kind of flicked over the top, ended up on top of the stage. And Cecil ends with a lot of confidence with another bullseye, but it's only going to give him a 3-throw total of 10 points. Going to leave him tied with Chris Henning with 10 points. Tim Keach still leading the way with a mere 11. That's very surprising. Paul Woodland, our last thrower.
Paul does great at a lot of the Lumberjack events, but one thing he's most consistent in is the axe throw.
And look at that, consistently throwing bullseyes. I know you've told me that over the years. He starts off with a bullseye, and that could lead to some confidence as well. 1 throw, 5 points.
We had a throw off last year in Riverside, Albert. We were bullseye for bullseye right through the end. Here he is again in a 4. So there's Paul. He's pretty confident, sitting right where he wants to be with a 5 and a 4.
Got 9 going into the final throw. He needs 3 or more to win this thing. If I'm going to bet, I would bet on Paul doing it. And look at that. He ends things off with a bullseye. Paul Woodland win the Chris Starr Memorial Axe Throw. Well, you know, I hear people talk about luck. I hear different styles of throwing. Some throw hard, some throw soft. Just tell me what is your strategy going into an axe throw final like that?
You gotta just stay really relaxed, because you let anything bother you, you're gonna miss.
I see some guys really trying to fire it in there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I find the guys that sort of lay it in there a little bit more successful.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Like throwing it really hard, if your release point isn't right on, you're gonna go high or low.
Does it feel pretty special to win something named after Chris Starr?
You're right, I do. That's why I come up here.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And it's a big win for Paul Woodland for a fellow Lumberjack, Chris Starr. Woodland wins the final with 14 points.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Dickies. Quality workwear since 1922.
Yeah, we're back in Brechin, Ontario for Lumberjack competition. Not only that, but we're headed for a pig roast after the competition is over, put on by local caterer Shaw's Catering, and I'm looking forward to that. But right now, Rod, we're looking forward to the single buck. We're going to be showing you the top 5 heats, and we're starting things off with Chris Henning taking on Matt Elliott. Matt Elliott is an OPP officer from Huntsville, Ontario. He's kind of been out of the game a lot lately. He's a Sir Sanford Fleming College grad, and he's picking up his axes and saws today to get back at it.
Hope he hasn't spent a whole lot of time with the donut shops, because they're sawing big wood here today. 18 inches around, poplar. Of course, usually they like to saw the white pine. It's a lot softer wood to go through, and don't have that advantage here today.
Now you can see the consistency in the wood from this picture here. They're both sawing through the exact same piece of wood.
That's what you want, of course. And of course, both men, you want to use a whole blade in the single buck. Use every inch of that saw. They cost about $1,500, so you want to make use of it all. You see, Chris Henning's got pretty good technique here using the whole blade. Actually, both guys are sawing pretty smoothly.
A couple different techniques. You see Chris Henning towering over the log. Matt Elliott is kind of dropping with it and keeping the saw parallel to the ground.
And his saw is actually followed, I'd say, a little bit better because, Bill, look how fast it's sinking compared to Chris Henning's saw, and he's down with 31.1.
Man, you haven't exactly been a regular in the circuit lately, but that was a pretty impressive show.
Yeah, not too bad for a little time off.
Yeah. And just tell me how it went.
Pretty good, had a good coach, was able to borrow a good saw today, so the cut went pretty well for a little time off.
Now, have you cut with that saw before? And tell me about, if you haven't, what's it like cutting for the first time with a specific saw?
So today was the first time I've used this saw. It was pretty aggressive. I was told just to try to keep it level and go fast.
Good job there by Matt Elliott with a 30.17 and setting the time to beat. We got another OPP officer coming up here, Steve Myhills, good friend of Matt Elliott, taking on Paul Woodland from New Brunswick. Now, Rod, when you come to a competition, you know it's expensive to get involved in these shows. You don't always have your own gear. What's it like borrowing a single buck saw?
A lot tougher then, of course, to find out how the saw runs. It usually takes 3 or 4 pulls back and forth to find out how aggressive is the saw, how much is it sinking, do I need to put more speed on or more weight? So you really got to judge it as you're going with a borrowed saw.
Well, as mentioned earlier, it's 18 inches round of wood. Paul Woodland looking nice and smooth right now. Steve Myhills with a big hang up in his saw coming out of the wood. That's dangerous.
Well, you seldom see a saw come that far out of the woods. The other problem that Steve's having here, you see his feet sliding on the deck. Hard to get a lot of power in a single buck when your feet are moving all over the deck.
Should be wearing spikes on a deck like this, that is for sure. Steve Myhills wins the heat with a 31.52. So what exactly happened when you were deep into the cut and the saw came out, and you were looking to get it back in that groove pretty quick?
Yeah, I was fortunate for that. I hit the raker with a little bit too much rock to it, and it happens. What do? Just get back into it. That's all you can do.
Still, the time to beat is 31.17, set by Matt Elliott in the first heat. This next heat, we got Kevin Stumpy Moynihan from just outside of Rochester, New York, taking on Gaston Duperre from Quebec.
And Gaston Duperre always carries a file with him. He'll try his blade in the wood before the event. If it's not sawing it right, he'll actually refile his blade and look at it sinking.
Kevin really struggling at the beginning here, the first 5 or 6 cuts. He couldn't get the saw going. He's got it going right now, but he's not going to catch Gaston. His saw's really dropping.
Gaston's saw's dropping really well, but you see Gaston running out of steam here a little bit as he's sawing close to the end.
Gaston wins the heat with a 24.26. Kevin struggling to the end while he runs out of gas. You have been using that same saw for many years. Can you talk to me about that saw?
Yeah, but we have to saw differently with this saw. I know the wood is hard to go, pretty hard today. And my plan was to take a speed in first, and after try to keep my speed, and I follow my pattern.
There were no problems at all. You did very well.
Very well, but at the bottom I was a little bit tired because the speed takes a lot of energy.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And you know, Rod, watching these first 3 heats, the firmness of this wood and the size of this wood, 18 inches, it's really taking its toll on these competitors.
The guys with more experience in the last few heats you've been watching, actually using their experience to their advantage. Gaston had blocks for his feet. Both these competitors have corks on their shoes. Their feet aren't moving at all. They're able to put a lot more of their energy into the stroke.
Cecil on the right-hand side really being aggressive with that saw. You can see the head jerk right into the block, following through on every stroke. Mike Coors hanging right with them. Are they going to beat the 24-26 set by Gaston?
They're running out of steam right now, getting down to the smaller wood, but Cecil pulls it through at the end.
Not quite enough to take over at first place. That saw allows you to get pretty aggressive.
Yeah, that wood's fairly firm, so you kind of had to put a bit of weight, but it's tricky. It's couldn't put as much crank on it as I wanted to, but if you put too much, then you lose your speed. It's harder to gain your speed back, so I just put the burr to it. I'm running out of gas here, but I still got a little bit left, so I got to use everything I got.
So now you start off relatively parallel to the ground with your saw, but as you get deeper into your cut, you're lifting up a little bit and getting a little bit more weight behind it.
Yeah, it's kind of I haven't trained much this year at the single buck at all. Something I need to train, but I try and keep it even down all the way through the log, but that just tells me I'm not cutting my near wood as much, but lack of training is having a good day, everybody's having fun, so.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Bill.
You know, one of the keys to success in the single buck is using the whole blade. You can see in that replay, Cecil actually burying the saw in the wood.
Losing the tip of it, the toe of it, right in the wood. Actually, if he had been 6 inches closer to the wood, he'd have had a perfect saw because he was actually holding out about a foot on the other end.
Well, good job by Cecil Starr, but not enough to take over Gaston, who still has a time to beat at 24-26. We got Paul Feniger taking on Marcel Dupuis. We got a Tuatai versus a Mercier.
But look already, see how fast these saws are sinking compared to the last bunch of heats that we've watched. Lumberjacks. These saws are really aggressive in this wood.
Paul Feniger a little bit slower, but really aggressive. Marcel, look at the pace on him.
Short blade, and he's using every bit of it, and sawing his fat. Oh, and he has a hang-up.
Both of them hang up at the exact same time, and my goodness, it's a photo finish. I think Feniger bought him by a hair.
Whoever it is, they just won the event.
You both hung up at the exact same time. It was a race to the finish. You both hung up, and you dropped off pretty close together. How do you feel about your cut?
Cut went pretty good. This wood isn't turnt on a lathe, so when they peel the bark, you have these little ridges on the wood, and that's exactly when I came down, when I closed the window, when I was finishing my stroke, it hung right on a ridge. It caught a ridge, and then I had to work it to get it off of that ridge.
Now, the announcer mentioned you're filing your own saws these days on the single buck. Is that one of the ones you touched up and filed?
Yeah, that is one of mine that I've redone.
And tell me about it.
All I did was re-go over some angles. It was a JP Mercier single, and I they get wood dull. The teeth get wood dull over time, so they need to be touched up with a file now and again.
Feniger cleans up in the single buck, narrowly beating Marcel Dupuis by 0.04 of a second. After a long day of competing, 2 performers have stuck out. Our crown pivotal point goes to Mary Reeder for being a warrior all day in events like the Ladies Stock Saw. And our lumberjack of the day is Feniger and his multiple wins in the springboard chop and the buck saw.
Lumberjacks is sponsored by Echo, only professional grade with 5-year warranty. Crown, protect, maintain, save. Dickies, quality workwear since 1922. Yamaha, rev your heart.
Must have been 4 or 5 as he jams the aluminum board into the second notch.
You can always hear that when you're at a show, the big twang of his aluminum board going into the back of the pocket. You know Gaston's up on his second board.
Both guys into the wood up top. Looks like Gaston has about a half a stroke lead over Mike, and both guys look like they got pumpkins.
Look at the difference in the way they swing. Gaston nice and steady and relaxed. Mike Core's going right at it. He's got a real hanger there. Really tricky to deal with, Bill. If one of those chips are hanging down in front of you, you're not sure, you can't see the other side of the block, and also if your axe hits it, it's going to travel right off the block.
Gaston all the way, 3/4 of the way through his block, making his turn on the backside. He sees it's soft wood. He's going to make it early. Mike Core's a bit of a slab, a split there.
All right, but Gaston finishes 58.3 seconds. Mike Core's got a little bit of a split here to deal with, but he's going to get it off just behind him.